And it's such a pleasure to welcome all of you here for this session on diversity. And we are going to try and do this session slightly differently. There are a couple of things we're going to ask all of you as an audience to do as well, but I'll just come to that in a minute. Just wanted to welcome our very special guests who we have with us, Smriti Zubin Irani. His very little introduction, Minister of Textiles in India. It's fantastic to have you with us. Shashi Mukundan is here as country head India of the BP Group and is going to be talking a lot about what's been happening in diversity. Parmesh Shahani is the head, the Godrej India Culture Lab. And Shamina Singh, it's wonderful to have you with us as President MasterCard. So thank you all so much for being with us. Now, before we jump into this, the forum wanted us to try something in the nature of an icebreaker, and it's a new thing that we're trying with the format. We'd like you all to spend 1 minute, turn to somebody, any of your neighbors sitting right next to you, and tell them a story of some time when you either witnessed somebody being excluded or experienced it yourself. Please raise your hands, everyone who either heard or narrated a powerful story of exclusion. So it's common. It's way more common than we would think. And I am therefore going to come now to the panel. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to throw it open to a more broader discussion of what we can actually do to make India more inclusive. And that's in every sense of the word, because, and I just want to ask you, Smriti, when you think about it and the government thinks about it, the issue of diversity and inclusiveness, there are various facets to it. There's gender, obviously, but there are other facets of diversity as well that probably need to be looked at.
I think at the first instance, we would need to recognize that diversity is not a challenge pertaining only to India. It's a challenge worldwide. It is a challenge that people across various sectors, various geographical areas are facing and positively responding to. The very fact that today we are talking about it on an economic forum also has a huge significance. Yes. Because it was not an element of discussion. It was mostly a part of hushed whispers which were happening in corridors, and definitely not conversations which were transpiring between men and women on open forums. So I think we have to recognize that we have gone a significant way, at least in that direction, that we are open about it, talking about it. It is a challenge that needs to be responded to, not only in business but across various facets of life. But there has to be a recognition of another fact, that when we look at women and we talk about women in our country, and especially if we talk about successful women in our country, Lego is doing a project of women scientists because they want to change the discourse of how women are projected or how they are received from childhood. Can we imagine such a project in our country? Yeah. Where the fairy tales which are normally told to all of us, and not only in our country but across the world, is about a woman waiting to be rescued always. The second issue that seeps in is if you look at a woman from a business point of view. I was recently in an event where we were felicitating women who are achievers, who are extremely powerful in the business community. And every time I saw the audio visual was about how great a woman she is because she looks after her family also apart from the business. Yeah. And the fact that she also takes walks and watches Saas Bahu serials. Now imagine the same. With that. No, my issue is this. Yeah. When we award men, do we talk about that humane facet about men in business?
Yeah, fair enough.
So that is, the signals are very mixed. And they are out there, they are not very dominant for you to claim victimization. But it is said that if a woman is extremely aggressive about reaching a particular goal, she's thought of to be too ambitious, too aggressive, and not feminine enough. Yeah. And we need to describe women who are achievers also with such a humane touch that it becomes very palatable for all of us. So I think that it starts from right from childhood, goes up all the way till you achieving. I'm sure that all the women here, most of them did not actually turn around and tell stories of their own victimhood or stories where they have been in any way discriminated upon. Because just the discussion also tags you as somebody who can't get over the fact that yes, her gender is a problem. So,
did you ever feel gender was a problem?
I have never used my gender as a crutch. Never. Not as a crutch to get acceptance, not as a crutch to get an entry into a door I have said that treat me as well as you would treat a male colleague. And when I was a professional in the media business, I know that women in our country, for the same amount of work, for the same kind of work, get 56% less pay as compared to men. But that is also a topic which is not openly discussed and debated. It's an accepted fact. We are getting an opportunity to work, so we'll make a mark for ourselves. So we are getting there, but like I said, there are many women who do not use their gender as a stepping stone or as a crutch.
But if I can turn to the rest of you before we come back to that, and one of the other twists that we're introducing in this particular panel is if you have a story to tell about yourself or about somebody else you know, which you think illustrates the issues around diversity, please feel free to do that. So why don't I come to you next?
Sure. So I'm Parmesh, and I actually have an image to share. This is an image of my colleague Naira. And Naira happens to be the first transgender employee at Godrej. I happen to be the first out and proud gay employee at Godrej. And over the past few years, Godrej, as many of you might know, is a 119-year-old legacy company rooted in the idea of Swadeshi. But over the past few years, we've just transformed radically on various facets of diversity. We've become, in a sense, the only Indian company which has taken up this issue. Why have we done this? We've done this because, first of all, fundamentally, we believe that, when you talk about diversity, you can't be diverse about some things and not be diverse about the other. So you can't say, I want gender diversity, but I don't want LGBT diversity.
You're saying that if you are to be inclusive and you have to be diverse and inclusive about everything.
I think it's a mindset. More than anything else, inclusiveness is a mindset. When you say everyone is equal, irrespective of where they've come from, what religion they belong to, what gender they are, you cannot exclude who you choose to love from that. So that's number one. But the second thing, and I really want to mention the data because this is the World Economic Forum. In the morning, we released a report which said that India went up to 39 now on the Global Competitive Index. Now, there's so much research. There's Gallup research that just came out that said that were we LGBT friendly, we could have gone up by 10 or 15 more points as well. I was reading something which said that 64% of young Indians, LGBT or straight, want to work for a company which is LGBT friendly. It's not just LGBT employees who want to work for LGBT friendly companies. Straight people too want to work for a company which just respects them for who they are. So there's enough of a business case with data.
If there's a culture of tolerance, it will extend to a large
culture
number
of exclusion. I mean,
of
inclusion. I mean, culture of not exclusion rather.
Yeah.
Which is also so prevalent in corporate India. Yeah.
All right.
So, Vikram, I'd come
would you agree with his views on any story that you want to share?
No, so I want to come at this in a different way. I want to come at this more from an international company. And when I look at globally today, like as Mr. Shahani said, you're becoming so big and everything is getting so closed in that you cannot not think about diversity and you cannot not think about inclusion as you look at these things. Look at our kids. Our kids are learning from this across the globe, right? This is why you're seeing kids from small villages who are becoming so successful. Why are they successful? It's because they're able to get to see that diversity across the globe. So my story is about a girl called Pushpa, and she's from a small village in UP. She came from a family which had 5 siblings, more than 5 siblings. She has almost a dozen siblings. She was one of 5 daughters. She lost her father. He had a lot of debt, so the whole family ended up, selling everything that they had. This girl took it on herself and said, I'm not going to become a victim for this. I'm going to go do stuff. She came to Delhi. She actually started working as a maidservant, enrolled herself in the university. She's now got an Aadhaar card. She's got all her family medical insurance. All of this in a matter of 3 years. And now her goal is she's collecting money to get a Maruti Alto so that she can put that into the Ola cab fleet. I mean, it's an incredible story, to see somebody not taking it as a victim, but saying, okay, I'm going to go out there and do this. And this is what you're going to see across the globe. So for us, when we look at it as a business, it's a business case. There is a business case for diversity, and there's a business case for inclusion.
There's a business case for inclusion, and that story, in addition to all the benefits of its own and the transformation of society, you're saying there's a business case for it as well. Let me get you in.
I guess the perspective that I'd like to share, in addition to the ones that have been already talked about, sort of relates to my own experience as the daughter of immigrants. So my parents are from Punjab and Ajmer, and they went to the United States in the 60s. And so I sort of come at it from a place of fitting in everywhere and not fitting in everywhere. It's sort of the experience of diversity when you are the first daughter born in the United States of immigrants from India, raised in a small southern town. And then if anybody knows anything about the South in the United States, you know that at least in the 60s and before then, it was a pretty homogenous place to be. And so being the daughter of a Pakka Sardar in a small town in Chesapeake, Virginia, could have been quite an experience. But to your point, when my father went over to study, he first went to a place in Georgia, which you really can't get much southern than Georgia in the United States, and the people of the town all bought lottery tickets to win a car. So when the lottery was announced, they gave all the lottery tickets to my father and gave him the car.
Wow.
And that was for a young Pakka Sardar from India coming to Georgia to do his studies so that he could have the transportation to bring his wife and kids over. So this notion of diversity, there are no blacks, there are no whites, there's no if, there's no ands, it's all something that I think is created, to your point. Yeah. It's a frame. It's a state of mind. And so I think that there are positives and there are negatives. But I also happen to work for a company, as you said, that's also the CEO is a Sardar. And, so this notion of fitting in everywhere and not fitting in anywhere is something that we wrestle with a lot. And the way we come at it, to your point again, is that there is a huge race and war for talent. Yeah. If we don't recruit the talent into a company like a MasterCard or anywhere else, if we don't invest in women in technology, in women in science, in women in math, in women in economics, and we don't bring our whole selves to work, then we're going to lose the war on talent.
What is going to happen to diversity in the United States a month from now?
I don't think diversity is something that, is going to happen or not based on an election. I think an appreciation for diversity will remain no matter who wins the election.
Yeah, my guess is it will remain because, again, if you think about it, there's a business case behind it, right? And you will need to do that because if you look at the U.S. today, it's much more, different than what it used to be.
If you take what has made the United States great over the period of time, it's because it has assimilated, it has taken so many people, it has been inclusive, and that's been one of the major sources of strength of the United States. And that, in a sense, is also what the Indian history has been. Smriti?
I think that we need to look at the diversity issue not only from a business point of view or a political point of view. It is actually a people's point of view. In the US, whatever I know of its history, it was a people's movement that brought about or ushered in a change. Today, if there is conversation about a lady leading and possibly taking on the reins, we as Indians can be extremely proud that we have had women in positions of power throughout our polity, cutting across political lines. And I think it's a huge compliment to the men in my country that it has not become the subject of debate. The fact that a leader needs to be less of a leader because she is a woman has never been a conversation at least in the Indian diaspora per se. And I think that is one of the biggest achievements, at least from my nation's perspective, which is a compliment that should be extended to every man in my country, that we've had women come up in politics. But yes, the challenge...
If I can take that argument a little forward, what you were saying, right, it's happened in politics, across the political spectrum, but even in companies.
Yes.
If you look at banks, for example, look at the number of banks in India where the CEOs are actually women, and it hasn't really...
And media, the television industry has seen a lot of women leading. Banks, like you rightfully said, have led in terms of breaking the glass ceiling and that whole, conversation goes. Banks have led. So wherever women have had not only opportunities or a level playing field, but also wherever women have had mentors to take them forward. Women mentoring other women to take them forward. We have seen some significant change. We've seen that in media, we have seen that in the banking sector, and I'm sure that we'll see it across all sectors. Now we've had a huge emphasis put on girl-child education in the schooling system. We are seeing the benefits of that, and now as a nation we are pushing towards more and more women getting educated in the higher education sector. So whenever we as people put our strength behind, our resolve behind a particular issue vis-a-vis diversity, be it gender or otherwise, we see a kind of a change reflect in the polity or the economy accordingly.
I think it's a really interesting and an accurate point that she makes, that India quite often gets bad press over the way women are treated and on gender issues, which is also
That's on you.
correct.
You're in the media.
Yeah, okay, blame everything on the media. Fine, so everything is the media's fault. Let's take that as a given. But having said that, that's also correct. Women's safety is an issue. All of those problems come up, and yes, women are treated badly in a large number of cases. But in a country like India, sometimes the opposite of what is true is also true. And I think, as Smriti very correctly said, in many areas, India does not have as much of a problem with a glass ceiling as you do in some other countries.
When I think about diversity, I run something called the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth. And the basic theory there is connecting productivity and potential to the networks that drive the modern economy. So if you think about leadership, if you think about, if you think about by the ones, who's been a president, who's been a senator, who's been a prime minister, who's been elected, I think it's all about making sure that we create an environment that allows the most people to reach their most potential and to be the most productive. Because those are the things that unlock the economic potential of a country. So we've just released a study in partnership with Rama Bijaparkar and ICE 360 around the new Middle India and who comprises the Middle India, their purchasing power, how they live, earn, spend, and save. And the biggest takeaway from that study is that the more you create an environment where people are connected to the networks that drive the modern economy, connected to an ability to reach their potential through their labor productivity, regardless of who they love, how they're born, where they work, where they live, then you're creating an economy that unleashes potential. And ultimately, to me at least, that's the inclusive growth that we're trying to achieve.
You want to add to that?
I actually want to go back to what you said about India being inclusive as such, and for gender for sure, but even for LGBT, which is something that I spoke about earlier. If you look at pre-British India, we were very inclusive. If you look at our mythological texts, and people like Devdutt Patnaik, and there have been so many other scholars and authors who've written about it, are very inclusive. It's just, I'm just wondering, and so that's one. If you look at young India today, I recruit for Godrej, we go to colleges across the country. For most young Indians, it's not an issue. So for exactly these reasons, right? People want careers, people want better lives. So I just wonder why middle-aged India, I think the issues are in the sense with middle-aged India, people like us. Because the young
Don't
India...
call me middle-aged. I'm not in middle-aged. I'm 40.
Okay,
I don't know whether that's middle-aged. You said middle-aged India.
Okay, I'm so glad.
Can we be inclusive on an age point of view?
We'll be age inclusive.
How about be inclusive to those of us who are aged?
Okay, we're all middle-aged, like we're all middle class. We're all middle-aged.
I'm okay with middle class, I'm 40, is that middle age?
I'm 42.
Okay, because I'm not.
Okay, let's say if you talk to people below 25, you talk to people below 25, they have other issues, right? They want to succeed on the parameters you were talking about in your study. If you look at our history, it's inclusive. So I'm just wondering why, when there's such momentum for inclusion, say gender, say sexuality, say everything, you go out there, people want to be included and people want to include. Why then are we so apprehensive about widening the net of our inclusion is my question.
Yeah, I actually want to just take it, I'm going to throw this to all of you. A country like India, there are some who would argue, and I think that would probably be correct, that India doesn't have a choice but to be inclusive and to embrace diversity. Because, Smriti, if you take a look at it, India is probably the most diverse country in the world. So if you add all the different ways in which Indians are different from each other, from not just on gender grounds or LGBT grounds or any other grounds, it's on religious grounds, on regional grounds, on language grounds, on ethnic grounds, on race grounds. Just look at what a diverse country this is. And if we are not going to be inclusive and accept diversity, we're going to struggle, which is why all through our history we've been inclusive.
I think that apart from Ms. Singh giving a description of her own family, let me make a disclosure. So my dada is a Punjabi, dadi is a Maharashtrian, Nana is a Bengali, Nani is from Assam, and husband is a Parsi from Gujarat. And I carry, apart from the fact that I'm a woman, I have a surname like Irani, which does not do you well if you're at US Customs. You need to understand the fact, I mean, this is my personal belief. When you say India has no other choice, change cannot...
It's also actually in our DNA, frankly.
I think that change cannot be a compulsion.
Yeah.
If you want that change to permeate, if you want that change to be lasting. It is a change which has to happen very organically. It is a change which emanates from people. Legislation has only a certain, jurisdiction within it which it works. It can't change hearts, it can't change mindsets. It can punish you if you do something wrong. So I think that if you genuinely want to talk about a change in mindset, then it has to start from when you're very young. He's right, we are middle 40, I have kids. It has to start with my kids recognizing that everybody has to be respected, irrespective of their region, religion, sexuality, whatever. But for us to say that I want to be inclusive, but let XYZ, let corporate tell me how to be inclusive, let government tell me how to be inclusive, that will not, I think, cut ice. We as people have to be ready with our families, have those conversations with our families, and then we will see that change happen. Otherwise, if you say that change is nothing but a compulsion, but also shall be thrust upon you as a policy, you will not see definite change.
You can't have change by government policy. Are we less inclusive than we once were?
I don't think that we are less inclusive. I think what's happening is we are more aware because of the fact that there's more information being given out to people. We're much more aware of it, and what you're seeing is more and more people trying to become more inclusive, think about diversity and such. I mean, just take the case of the IAS system, right? You get placed in different parts of India. You may not be from Kerala, but you might be posted there, and and you grow up, and then you keep shuttling back and forth, and you're bringing so much diversity into the center. How many places in the world do you have that kind of inclusiveness that's happening? I think what we need is more of a system in place where we can start thinking about, how do we make it more an institution or a system where we start giving that opportunity for everyone to come in and participate. So, can I be a little bit more inclusive in my work? When you bring people into an organization, you got 50-50, right, men and women. But as they start going up, it's going down. Why is that? It's because, how do you provide them that? So one of the things BP does is, globally we've got this thing called as agile workplace, which is essentially we are giving people the opportunity to work from home, flex times, maternity leave, and what we're doing is we are also telling the men, you need to also think about agile workplace because you need to now start recognizing your spouse who's working, who needs to also do this.
Take care from what Mr. Mukundan is saying. But let me just give you a small example of how women, though capable, never find positioning. When I became the HRD minister in the IIT Council, the first meeting that I took, I saw that there were all men in the room and I said, don't you have a woman representative? So they said, Aap hai na? I said, I'm here by the virtue of the office I hold. They said, no, they're not good enough to be amongst the top layers of engineers of this country.
Seriously?
Yes.
That's crazy.
And this is some of the most celebrated names. So I had a nomination which came up to me and I was asked to nominate 2 people and the nomination list was all men. So I said, why can't you find me some woman of repute who can take that position? They said, no, we don't have any. So I picked up my phone and I directly called Tessie Thomas. And I said, ma'am, would you consider being a part of this council? I could almost hear her voice break and she said, how did you think of me? I said, can you imagine in a country where you have a master like Dr. Kalam, ably assisted with Tessie Thomas, for her to feel, oh, you just discovered me. I said, you're one of the most talented Indian scientists. Why would I not want you to have a position in IIT Council? And it is my privilege that she is one of the first women to get into the IIT Council. So when you talk about women in science, women in economy, technology, if you don't see them in positions of power where they are seen to be making decisions,
Right.
women at the bottom of the layer feel that ja ke aur kitna ja payenge.
Just to add to that, earlier you all said change can't be mandated, but you can, as you did with Tessie, or as you're doing with BP, or as they're doing with Godrej, say for LGBT, you can create an infrastructure which encourages people to step ahead. So a lot of it is not mandating.
I tell you where I differ on that issue. See, it's not as if Tessie Thomas just became a scientist when I became minister.
Sure. Yeah.
So she has been there in the Indian scientific community to be placed in those positions where she can make a difference.
And here the issue is women are 50% of the population, and there are lots and lots of talented women who can come into that position. In other areas, there are other questions which happen, that how do you need to start training them from an earlier age. And that's why when you come back to affirmative action and making sure, for example, there are more representations of Dalits in positions of higher educational learning, then the question comes, but you really need to improve it from the primary school level and then the secondary school level.
I think that reservation is available.
Yes.
Reservation is available even for posting of academicians. That is not the challenge. But like I said, if I have a kind of an outreach to a Tessie Thomas, that happens because a mindset is developed as a child, as a young girl. So when you talk about inclusion, it's about, like he says, orientation. I mean, look at the dichotomy, Vikram. We are a nation, a civilization which said Vasudev Kutumbakam. We said the world is one family eons back.
Yes.
And if I look at the contradiction today, in the Arthashastra, there was punishment for sexually harassing a woman at the workplace. But the sexual harassment at workplace bill got passed in Parliament in 2013. Which means that as a nation, we have a legacy of inclusion that we can be extremely proud of diversity, of understanding the rights of each human being, that we can be extremely proud of. There has been a gap somewhere, there have been shortfalls, we as people can fill it. But we need to start not only at levels of corporate or policy or politics for that matter, or education, but we also have to start it at home.
But also, I think to your point, ma'am, the incentives have to be aligned. If the incentive is to attract the best talent, regardless of sexual orientation, gender, et cetera, you have to go find the best talent. Because there's a recognition that without the best people around the table, innovation will not happen. And one example that we've done as a company is, it's the same thing Ajay would say. HR would bring him a slate of candidates that wasn't as diverse as he thought it should be. And for him, it was more about diversity of talent and leadership to make sure that there are ideas around the table that are fostering innovation to bring new ideas to the company. And so he suggested that, because he got the same answer, that, look, it's very tough to find engineers, technology, things like that. So he said, okay, then let's start recruiting from women's universities. Let's add them to the mix, at least, of universities from where we're recruiting. So those are the types of strategies that one can employ in order to incentivize in a way that brings in the talent.
So let me just shift focus a little bit and come into one other aspect of diversity that perhaps you don't think about often enough, which is simply diversity of thought and diversity of opinion. And there was a strong view that people had that with social media and everything else that's happening, you will throw it open and there'll be a far more, you'll be listening to lots of different opinions and different voices and all sorts of things will come in. Today, there are some people who are wondering whether that's really the truth, or today it's sometimes seeming that everyone's getting into ideological echo chambers. Any opinions that are contrary to yours, you don't want to listen to them, you want to shout them down, and quite often in ideological echo chambers on social media and other things, you will not allow other voices to be heard. Is that something that you think is gathering momentum?
So I personally think while all of that is happening, there's also incredible new spaces that are coming up where people are expressing their voices. For example, women might not have representation on national TV as much, There's Khabar Lahiriya, which is a newspaper run by women in
Actually,
Bundelkhand.
television news is almost entirely run by
Taken
women.
over by women.
I can't think
Run
of it.
by
I
women, but
I
are
can't-
the topics about women or whatever? So that's one
GCs
thing.
also.
That's one thing. But in Bundelkhand, there's Khabar Lahiriya, which comes out, which is women run. It's an incredible newspaper, which is women run, women funded, which runs up. Now, they might not watch nightly news debates with 10 talking heads all shouting over each other, but they have a very rich
no idea what
source
you're
of
talking
news. They're a very rich source of news. So while I agree there's a lot of echo chambers happening, I think it's happening in English speaking and perhaps English and Hindi and televised media. I think if you look at media at large, I'm actually seeing a range of things. I'm actually seeing incredible examples of gender, LGBT, all other kinds of diversity out there.
My question is for Smriti ma'am. You've rightly mentioned that, as Indians, we've always had this idea of inclusion. Do you think that the curriculum that exists today, because in almost all panels that I went today, people have pointed out that the primary education in India is a major gap that we need to come. So do you think that at that point, imbibing those values, so first they have to come from the families, but do you think that education can play a major role?
From a school perspective, what we did was to ensure that you talk about more and more women who have contributed to your history, to your economy, and start making children write essays about them. Because I realized that the first thing a child understands is when they want to do a little bit of a research for the essay they're writing, they suddenly realize that, oh, I did not know this lady existed, or this was her contribution. So one is that. The second is women in science and technology is what I was pushing, which we as a government are continuing to push, to have more and more women in positions where they can influence decision within institutions. For instance, I had the opportunity, I had 11 vacancies for chairmen for National Institute of Technology, and I picked 6 women. And they said that, how do you pick 6 women? We didn't have these many before. I said, because the prerequisite for choosing a chairperson was that they have to be some brilliant people in the business world or in the corporate world. So I had people like Chitra Subramaniam, the chairperson of the National Stock Exchange. All these women come forward, and now they are leading these institutions and effectively affecting the administration in those institutions. Right. So when you talk about education, it has to be done not only from a curriculum perspective, but also from the perspective of administration, because that is where you'll get a holistic impact.
All right, we are out of time now. So, Mr. Bajaj, one quick comment from you, and then I'm going to get final thoughts from the panel.
Thank you. You cannot thrust empowerment on women. I truly believe that men and women are equal. I would like to believe that men should feel empowered in the empowerment of women. Women should feel the joy. So please don't exclude men. However, your lady colleague has excluded men in the bill which allows 9 months of maternity leave. Why not men? I would like to bring up my children too. Like those, why men should be excluded. But coming...
Well, I ran this campaign to try and get paternity leave in my organization, and because women in my organization have 6 months maternity leave and men had 15 days, but it had nothing. Then I finally got it to 15
Can
days.
we continue that
Yeah.
thrust in your channel? I would love to
Certainly.
do that before. But my 2 questions are, with women being so equal to men, why is it that 50% of our boards are bereft of a single woman director, though there's a law which says at least one woman? So what we do is, we are putting our wives or mother or daughter there just to fill up the gap of law.
Yes.
Why is it only the 5% of the CEOs of India, if not the world, I don't know, world, are women? What's happened?
But that's exactly, I think Mr. Bajaj makes my point, that you can have a law come into force, but it's incumbent upon people to bring about that change and that change to permeate. But as a rider, Mr. Bajaj, I went back to work after giving birth in 3 days.
Wow.
So I didn't take any maternity leave.
Okay, you've just silenced all of us. You've silenced all of us. We'll all shut up now and sort of hang our heads quietly.
No, but
okay,
I think
Sandeep.
that
I'll just
you
take a
made the
minute.
We are
case,
completely
you
out
made
of
the
it,
case for a law which exists, but for it to be enforced, it has to be a people's movement, a movement from the corporate world.
You know,
And there is a case through a McKinsey report which says that businesses which have had more and more women
Yeah.
in management positions actually see more profits as compared to other businesses.
Absolutely. As 2 years as Women's Empowerment Committee chairperson, and I had all very powerful ladies, I wanted to change it to Men's Empowerment Committee. We came to the conclusion which you said. Women are not able to reach the top positions because of the break.
Right.
Which are the two breaks? Marriage and childbirth.
Okay, Mr.
Break
Banana,
that barrier by what you just now said. Either come back early by creche system, whatever it is, or flexi time, flexi location, so that the ladies are given
Okay,
work which they can work.
So I'm sorry to wrap you up, but we are completely out of time. One quick line,
So very
one suggestion which we can walk out of the room with, which immediately pushes inclusion.
Sure. One is
Basic
train your
diversity.
kids for empathy, echoing what you said, and I'll add a second because I think it's very important for our LGBT population. Really get with 377. It's an antiquated relic of the British colonial past. It has nothing to do with a global economy like India. So,
The review.
and I love that all of y'all are so supportive. Thank you. I think we'll build that social, as you said, if society has to change, we're already seeing people are so supportive.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Diversity is something really important, and let's continue to push for a more inclusive India.